Several hurricanes have hit New Orleans since Katrina, but with the defenses there, it's been preserved. And one of them, Hurricane Ida, was even stronger than Katrina and was in a very similar track. And we had no loss of life from storm surge. What had so devastated us previously, we'd actually repelled. And it's hard to get credit for that. And there's still a lot of suffering in any type of storm with the wind damage and stuff. But our investments that we got out there in time have paid for themselves several times. And so that's something we're trying to capture and tell our story, is that these coastal projects do deliver way more than you even realize.
Welcome to Shaping Shores, the Centennial podcast of the American Shore and Beach Preservation Association. For 100 years, ASBPA has united people across science, policy, and practice to preserve U.S. shores and beaches. If you're listening, you should be one of these people. Become a member or make a gift today at asbpa.org. I'm your host, Nicole Elko, ASBPA's Executive Director. And today we continue our ongoing series with ASBPA's Coastal Champions, discussing how we're shaping the shores of tomorrow. I'm delighted to be joined by Neal McMillin, Director of Federal Affairs for the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development, based in Baton Rouge. Neal is an active ASBPA member and is presently co-chair of ASBPA's Government Affairs Committee. Neal, welcome. Thank you for being with me today.
Fantastic to be here, Nicole. So glad to be on and talk coastal with ASBPA, just a wonderful organization that's making a difference for all of us.
Thank you. And you're certainly helping with that a lot these days, and we appreciate that. We're all really interested to hear the Neal McMillin story of how you landed in this interesting, but maybe a little bit hard to find career in coastal policy.
You know, I really came at it by being very interested in renewable energy. And I was excited in college about the prospects for decarbonization and developing new energies. And an area I was very interested in, from kind of some personal travel to Scotland, was marine renewable energy. And so that's kind of a mouthful, but that's like offshore wind, but also kind of new ideas like wave and tidal energy. And there's some really interesting advantages and challenges to those. I mean, anything in the sea is really hard to design, withstand the salt and the pressure. But the power of the sea, as all of us in the coastal world know, is incredible and worth pursuing. So I joined up at University of Washington on a National Science Foundation grant on tidal energy, and was just really trying to study from a social science perspective of like, how can we try new things in the U.S.? How can we experiment with new technologies and see if they work, and so we can advance that challenge? And it was actually there's a lot of difficulties doing something new in the coastal policy space, and so that in fact, the project I was there to study got canceled during the study. So we were kind of learning from setbacks and kind of how to move it forward. And so when you're bringing energy into the coastal zone and kind of all the different interests, whether it's fisheries, recreation, shipping, transcontinental cables, like it was just such a complicated space, and it brought all sorts of interest together. And I was like, all right, this coastal is even more interesting than just pure energy. The social sciences is so compelling. And also the government and our rules seem to be a challenge. So I was very interested in participating in the policy space and was able to do what's called a John A. Knauss Fellowship on the Hill through NOAA Sea Grant, where they kind of pair some early career folks exiting master's and PhDs programs to get that Hill literacy experience. And I was really fortunate to match up with my home state senator and a great senator, Roger Wicker of Mississippi. And he was on the Commerce Committee, and I started out as his oceans guy, and was able to earn a spot on the team and go from there, working on fisheries policy, Army Corps, Mississippi River items, and ports, trade, and coastal and environment was just such a sweet spot. And I've been able to go from there and kind of stay in that policy space. So it's been a great spot, very interesting, and I think important and worth preserving.
So I'm curious about the tidal energy research you were doing. I am actually obsessed with tidal bores. In fact, on an earlier episode, General Graham tells the story of how I have surfed tidal bore waves in Alaska, and I actually plan to do it this coming year up in the Bay of Fundy. So where were you studying tidal energy, and like how much do you need? Do you need as much as in like turning an arm in Alaska, or can you find enough tidal energy in less energetic places, I guess?
Uh, that's a great question, and awesome that General Grant could be referenced. What a great guy. Um, the further north latitude you are, at least in this hemisphere, the better for this. So you're not going to have tidal energy in our great Gulf of America with that once a day tide. But when you get up into the Puget Sound, the Bay of Fundy would be the top tidal resource place in the world, actually. So you're taking on the big one, which is fantastic. And then in Scotland, kind of at the top of Scotland, it's one of the premier places. And so Japan could be interesting. And what's so cool is like you're planning your tidal trip, and that's such a unique feature of tidal energy is the predictability, which helps you integrate it conceptually into the grid and kind of maximize it and have confidence in what it is. So it's a very unique feature for a renewable to be able to predict it to such precision. So it's it we always say it's not going to solve energy crisis, but it could be a great asset, a diversifier in these type of locations.
Fascinating. Yeah, that's what I love about you, Neal. You're always telling me something I didn't know, the policy world, and you always seem to have that technical enough, you know enough about it from a technical space, and that's a great skill set. I think that maybe the Knauss Fellowship, but we can go right into that. Like Knauss Fellows always seem to have that beautiful blend of science and policy.
That's right. And, some of us come to it from uh, a very sciencey background and are working on the communication. Others are just passionate about helping science advance. But, that's one thing I feel like as a fellow, when you're on the Hill, kind of who are your clients? Who are the stakeholders you're trying to help out? And universities and research and engineers and building projects. Like that's a lot of those are the kind of the clients you're supporting. And so you have to be a little scientific literate, but also you got to be able to communicate that to, decision makers who have not only no background in that, but also very limited time. So hopefully I can kind of take the key nuggets and go forward. But at the same time, to really make policy happen, you do need a level of in-depth knowledge. Like we're not going to save the coast or really change things if someone's always surface level. So having that Knauss Fellowship, the people kind of with backgrounds insert is very valuable. And, I can think of a friend who had a PhD in ecology that was somehow a Hill staffer. And man, we came up with so many creative ideas through that way. And so many scientists and especially folks in the environmental space have a distaste for DC and policy and what they see on the news. But let me tell you, if you got some of those social skills and are willing to get something that's pretty interesting, we absolutely need you to be successful. And it can be a really rewarding place to enter. So strong rec, whether it's through the fellowship or through any other way to not let the DC impression, especially this was really keen when I was out in Seattle, is they're like, why would you go to that Washington? But we actually do as a country definitely need folks to at least take a time there, a stint there, and make a difference.
Yeah, for sure. I know that all of the Knauss Fellows that we've worked with through ASBPA have that perspective. And as you know, at ASBPA, we're about to head to Washington for our annual policy summit for coastal communities. And I think the students are all oftentimes nervous to come to the summit, right? They're totally comfortable going to the technical conference. That's their wheelhouse. But every single student that has been exposed to it, young person, new professional, they get a lot out of it. And
Right.
like you said, it sort of opens up their eyes to, well, this isn't really as scary as I thought it was going to be.
No, and there's a lot of just hustle and initiative and trying to figure it out in DC. That's not really not a rule book for how to be an excellent staffer or get something done. It's every situation is unique. And then the other thing too, is I noticed is that a lot of people's frustrations in the career, like, why is the world work this way? Or why are we set up in this challenge? Or don't they realize this is a problem? Well, you come to DC and you realize maybe how that came about, or the things that you thought were problems just aren't recognized. So, um, if you really want to solve those problems that feel like a little out of your control, a little DC literacy could go a long way into helping guide you and your organization, your community, your area, in a good direction.
Yes, for sure. So you went from kind of like doing this sort of social research on energy, right, with tidal energy, to a Knauss fellowship, and you're immediately thrown into the Hill. So, and that was a few years ago now. So, what have you seen happening? Like, you've been kind of on the Hill since then. You've been a staffer. You're now in Louisiana. What's going on in the coastal field in terms of changes in policy just in your short time, really?
Sure thing. So to give orientation, I came in really at the first of Trump's first term. So that's kind of my era. Everyone was saying this is brand new, unprecedented, and it just kept going that way. And maybe DC's always brand new and unprecedented, but that's kind of the era. And so what was kind of exciting through there is there was a lot of desire to do coastal funding in a big way and prove that it was a cause worth funding, and there's lots of benefits to have. And um, back then we were talking about the blue economy a lot and what that was, and how it's a lot more than just tourism condos and some seafood restaurants. Like, the coast is so much more, and I think that's a narrative that will always be compelling, to stand any administration. So I think we continue to build on that. But then we kind of built into the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and even the Inflation Reduction Act to a degree, and really surged funding to coastal agencies, particularly like NOAA, and working with the National Fish and Wildlife Federation's Coastal Resilience Fund, and put out, $500 million, maybe 2 billion cumulative projects, and those got out the door. And, coming back where I am in Louisiana, we'd always been saying, a coastal project doesn't need to just be a $2-3 million little project. We need to do large things. We need to talk tens of millions, hundreds of millions. And while those federal opportunities weren't necessarily that big, they're much bigger than ever before. And I think there's a lot of proof of concept. And then the other thing that's, in addition to having the opportunity and showing that we can deliver projects that add value, that are working, when I was kind of on the Hill and when we're starting this advocacy for the state of Louisiana, a lot of folks were like, why is coastal important? Are you sure that's a good use of funding? And the conversations really changed to like, how can we get you more funding? We definitely need to do this. There's huge economic benefit. There's huge environmental benefit. The coast is at the kind of the key point with climate shifts. Like, let's focus on that. So I got nervous thinking about saying the word consensus, because it's not quite that simple, but the level of appreciation and the like, how can we take action? How can we meet this goal is very persuasive there. And I've run a coalition that tries to be nationwide, but we meet with everybody coastal in DC a few times, and that's consistent across the country. Even in the interior is like, well, how can we get you resources? That's like, what's the scheme to get you there? And I think that is so exciting for us in coastal, is that folks want to help us. Let's just continue to put good projects, good concepts, science-based stuff, and prove that we deserve it and keep going.
Right. Yeah. So we started out talking about you as being interested in social science and how that experience has really helped you as you're advocating for these funding levels, communicating with policymakers, elected officials. You get this experience as a Hill staffer. And in fact, ASBPA has really benefited from this. Last year, for example, during the government shutdown, you and I had tons of meetings with Hill staffers, and I really appreciated you being there. I value your experience as a Hill staffer because you can speak their language and you know when to say, well, your boss can do this, and this rhythm that y'all speak is very helpful for ASBPA to get our message through.
Well, that's really kind of you to say. And Nicole, you're a great partner in crime. I mean, with your sunny disposition and consistency. So it was definitely a lot of fun, and that was kind of ironic, right? When folks are like, "Oh, the government shut down. Oh man, it's beyond my control. I guess all our goals are sidelined for the year." And in actuality, I'm like, well, as a former staffer, I know those chief of staffs and members are saying, don't let those constituents think you're being lazy during the shutdown. Your butt needs to be working. And so it's actually a great time to take advantage of it. Because I was like, I know these people are free, and I know they're sitting there, and let's see how we can get to use. And so it's connecting the staffers and, like you said, trying to know what they can do to be helpful. Because just as we were talking about, they want to be helpful, but when we bring giant problems like the world is challenged, the coasts are eroding. I mean, how are they supposed to respond? Like, yes, their member is one of the top 500 people in the country that can make a big difference, right? Outside of maybe the huge philanthropy people. But like, how do we give them an item that they can take and take action and move the ball down the field? And that's what we constantly got to be getting first downs and advancing it there. And so coming up with like what they can do to be helpful. Like, okay, you're on this committee. I think you should be able to call over to your committee chair and say, my boss has a priority, just reminding you, thank you so much. Or your boss is tight with the administration. How about you use that? Or, what's kind of seeing the lay of the land and what's their best lane, and then just asking directly for it. And then trying to follow up, give them exactly what they want to, and stay on them. And then I'm not on the Hill anymore. So we found out during that work last year that, oh, well, there's a sensitivity here. And I was like, oh, well, that's great information. We want this to happen. Thank you for finding that out. We can be patient. We can use that intel. So even if they didn't do our idea, they really helped us be even more strategic so that we avoid roadblocks. Because yes, the individual office wants to help us. The staffer wants to help us. But a lot of people at the level above, they've been around long enough. They don't want to say yes to every idea. They want to make sure it's vetted, smart, strategic, politically acceptable. And so you kind of have to, once you got that initial action, you got to get to the next level. And, being reliable, consistent, open-minded, things that ASBPA is the way to get through that next level into success.
That's right. Yeah, I feel like we had a great advantage also. We met with congressional staffers, committee staffers. We met with Republicans. We met with Democrats. We met with Senate staffers, House staffers. And, when you talk about coastal, you don't really sense pushback. It's not a partisan issue.
No, it's, everybody loves the coast. I mean, I haven't met one person that's like, man, it was super scary seeing the ocean. I never want to be back. Like, no, they're ready to help us. And it's not, and that's the policy area I've always like to work in, which is where things can happen, where we bipartisan. There's actually a ton of bills and efforts that pass Congress that you'll never hear about. So Congress does function at I don't know if you want to call it the medium level. Maybe these big ticket items like healthcare and education are so, maybe parties kind of switched on that area, but preserving the environment, preserving our coast, they're right there. And so where it's partisan, that's only really in here's the relationship, or here's who's in charge of the administration. So yes, you need to be aware of that, but we can use it to our advantage in both directions, any direction. And that's reflective in Louisiana too. Like, and that's the thing I've always emphasized when we're across the country is like, we're all in on saving the coast. We know how important it is. It's a big deal environmentally, business wise, culturally. Gosh, it's culturally down here for sure. And that resonates up there. And so we should never, in my opinion, hitch our advocacy to only one solution forever, like only one team. But we should lean into who's in charge and talk their language and make a compelling case, and not be afraid to say that coastal's worth the cost, because it really is, and we can deliver it. So when there's a lot of change, a lot of times I've experienced this even just in my short career of there's just pervasive anxiety over some change, or and it's really, there's really no need to have to retreat. Um, so hopefully that's something that we'll continue to do no matter what.
That's right. Well, no need for retreat certainly harkens to the message that Louisiana is sending from a coastal preservation standpoint. So let's zoom in on your work region. What does coastal restoration and feel like? What is it that your constituents feel that they're preserving?
I mean, they're preserving their communities and trying to not go through the heartache and struggle and loss that a coastal community goes through a catastrophic hurricane. And so we've, um, I always want to be very respectful of what people have gone through. So, but the term I kind of use is like, we've been hazed by these hurricanes. And so we have that cultural memory, that hardship of Katrina, Zeta, Delta, all sorts of ones going through our communities. And so and we've seen at the same time that the environmental wetland loss in Louisiana, that's cumulatively the size of the state of Delaware and supposed to triple in the next 100 years if we do nothing, that only makes the risk worse in the hurricane. So it's very tied into protecting people and restoring the environment. And so there's a consensus that we don't want to go through this again. How can we make big investments in the right place that even a poor state like Louisiana can do with partnerships? And so we have a coastal master plan that's 50 billion, 50 years, and that tries to prioritize through science and engineering and community input. What's the top projects we should do, when we should do them, if we have the funding available. So it's an aspirational document. And sometimes we fund it through, great ways, like people recognize and we get funding through federal grants. A big one's been through unexpected disaster, like the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, which has helped us actually try to recover to the scale that's needed. And I guess that's overall what I sell as a coastal policy advocate, is trying to fulfill our master plan, where that's through being more urgent and rapid by, getting things done quicker, or by securing funding and having that science-based foundation, that community input, that lets people in the DC world go, I can trust that this is worth advocating for. Let's go for it. And so having that trust factor opens a lot of doors, and it removes this kind of scattershot pet project, elbow twisting nature that in the infrastructure world is super common. And if we're going to restore the coast, save our country's coastlines, we got to view it as infrastructure and kind of through that project mode. And so you got to be aware of some of the challenges in that scene, and having that science-based foundation, that buy-in has been transformational for Louisiana. And I encourage every other state to kind of start getting in that zone. Even if you will be competing for us for dollars, I still encourage you to do that.
So many of ASBPA's member communities are protecting tourism communities, right? A lot of coastal communities, they're members of ASBPA, have no other industry. No one comes to their town except to lay on a beach. The situation in Louisiana is quite different. So give us a feel of what it's like on the coast of Louisiana.
Man, those are great places to be. I wish I was there tomorrow, but let me tell you, Louisiana's got beaches and so much more. And you probably heard the term working coast. And sometimes I think that's viewed a little smallly, as in like a place where a fishing boat can unload some catch at a port. But it's Louisiana, like the coast is so versatile and large ranging. And I think more of our coasts across the country are actually like this if you think about it. But we're an energy coast. So we import and export tons of natural gas, oil, and anything you can ship on it. And that goes into these huge refineries and petrochemical facilities that are exporting globally and can be, the only location in the country that does that chemical that's needed for modern life so importantly. And then at the same time, right by there, right around it, literally up to the fence line, is the sportsman's paradise, where we have these great marshes and redfish and speckled trout. And, folks, the true fishermen come down from all across the country to take advantage of the Mississippi River and what it's brought to the marshes there. And so, and all around that, you have a culture of very hardworking people, blue collar folks, folks that have their families have worked offshore on the rigs or in the fishery industry or in the factories, as well as preserving like Cajun culture that's going on 300 plus years, and is that kind of charm that everyone associates with Louisiana and New Orleans, and why we're so kind of cherished nationwide. And so all that's intermingled. And what's so neat about that is that means that everyone supports the coast. It's not just a one lane story. It's we need this for national energy security. We need this for global trade. We need this for our natural resources. We need this for our fisheries. We need this for, the music and that makes life so enjoyable. The birthplace of jazz. So all that is connected to the coast in Louisiana, and so it's so much more than just a simple beach story. But at the same time, I think many places across the country have different parts of that, and if we can tell our diverse story and really fully show our what coasts offer, that's going to help us be successful. Because, like you said, a lot of people just assume coast, beach, vacation, leisure, nice. Obviously, that's great, but we have a lot of problems in this world. Well, no, it's actually a lot more interrelated, and Louisiana is a great example of that.
That's amazing. And you have because of that, a broad base of supporters that are really getting behind your preservation efforts.
That's right. We have, of course, the local governments, but we have the energy industry. We have big ports advocating for coastal resilience, like take Port Fourchon. We have a beach project there. We need that to help support all the boats that go offshore to the rigs for the Gulf of America's energy. So they're supporting a critical beach project. And if Fourchon's damaged, that can, and if Fourchon's out of commission, it can cost the federal or the national economy $700 million a day if they're cut off. So it's just staggering numbers if you think about it. So there's just so much more to preserve and save and sustain. And there's also a recognition that lots of places in the country aren't going to put a petrochemical facility or an offshore oil rig. So we're willing to host it. And so we would make the case that if we're willing to host it, we've got the people that will do it. Let's make sure we sustain this asset, because you can't just up and move it across the country. So we need to really recognize what coastal assets are worth protecting. And I think that makes a good case for Louisiana.
Yeah, it's a very impressive strategy, proactive, strategic plan that the state of Louisiana has developed. Very few other coastal states, I mean, maybe North Carolina and Florida have something similar, but it's rare to have such a diverse portfolio laid out almost like with options, right? A lot of these other states, their coastal preservation is putting sand on beaches, and you all have such a broad base of sort of the types of coastal ecosystems that you're restoring across Louisiana, right?
Sure. I mean, we do have some beaches, and that's one way of doing it. We've done barrier islands, which is a whole different ball game. And then a lot of marsh creation. That's one thing that we're very good at as a state is, we used to restore 30, 50 acres, and now we just completed a 3,000 acre project. So we've learned how to grow and do things in a big way to address a big problem. And then, we this whole nother type of infrastructure that is pretty rare across the country, storm surge levees, trying to take on the biggest cause of loss of life in a hurricane. And we've actually seen some success from that, even that's just paid for itself. And so several hurricanes have hit New Orleans since Katrina, but with the defenses there, it's been preserved. And one of them, Hurricane Ida, in 2021, was even stronger than Katrina and was in a very similar track. And we had no loss of life from storm surge. Our power grid had a big challenge, but what had so devastated us previously, we'd actually repelled. And it's hard to get credit for that. And there's still a lot of suffering in any type of storm with the wind damage and stuff. But we know we've our investments that we got out there in time have paid for themselves several times. And so that's something we're trying to capture and tell our story, is that these coastal projects do deliver way more than you even realize. And we'll continue to try to make the case that it's worth the investment.
That's the case that ASBPA has been trying to make for many decades. It's sort of the no news story after a storm means that we've succeeded, right? There was no life loss. The infrastructure was protected. Maybe the coastal restoration project was washed away, but it achieved its mission. It sounds like that's exactly what happened during the passage of Ida for you recently.
That's right. So, that was an interesting storm too, because we had areas that were kind of weak marsh and they were torn up like over 100 square miles. But our restoration projects that were fresh and out there, they withstood it. So it was an interesting contrast. And then at the same time, we've had other storms hit an area before the project got built. And that's just so defeating. And so the urgency too for coastal is something I hope we can all take on and send the message, especially for those coming to DC in a few weeks.
Great message. The proof of concept of having one community next to another with a restoration project in place and the neighboring community not having it, and the devastation that you see versus the protection that you see is another thing that ASBPA has been trying to educate about over the last several decades. So I'm excited to hit the hill with you, Neal, and others and take that message to Congress. So as we're wrapping up, I'd love to get a closing comment from you. What are your thoughts and parting words sending us off to the hill here? We've talked a lot about the bipartisan nature of coastal, maybe something along those lines.
Absolutely. I guess it's a passion point of mine, being a Republican Sea Grant fellow, where most of the fellows were in Democrat offices, and it's just, you need folks on both sides being teammates. And so I just encourage everyone that's coming up to DC or working in your home state is like, don't suppose that someone based off their partisan label is going to help you or ignore you or be a problem. Everyone can help you. And actually, we actually need consensus here. So our issues are always going to pass through consensus. And so we have to make the case to everyone. And we very much can. There's, and the other thing too, is it's not just partisan, there's regional differences and interior, exterior. That's, but at the same time, everyone has a coastal connection. We have incredible ways to make a case and be versatile. Now, I mean, if you know someone wants to hear something and you can deliver that, please do. Don't make the wrong case to the wrong place, but understand the complexity of our coast, the diversity of our coast, and choose what resonates and give it to them and follow up, and they're going to help us. And I absolutely think we have a great case to make, and we can sell the benefits of saving the coast very easily. So,
great advice. Coastal champion Neal McMillin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nicole. It's always a pleasure to chat with you and advocate for such a great cause.
Agreed. That's it for today's episode of Shaping Shores. I'm Nicole, and thank you so much for spending part of your day with us. If today's conversation inspired you, help us continue this work. Become a member or make a gift at asbpa.org. To hear more stories from the people protecting U.S. coasts, follow or subscribe wherever you listen. Together, we're shaping a resilient future for our nation's beaches and shores. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you again on next week's episode.